Good morning,
This
good
meeting is
afternoon,
being recorded.
and welcome to all participants to Africa Day at the High Level Political Forum. Your Excellency, Mrs. Cristina Duarte, the Under Secretary General and Special Advisor of the United Nations Secretary General on Africa, Dr. Vera Songwe, the Under Secretary General and Executive Secretary of the UNECA, Zahuna Eziakonwa, the Assistant Secretary General and Director of the UNDP, Regional Bureau for Africa, Her Excellency, Madame Arlette Soudan-Nono, la Ministre de l'Environnement, du Développement Durable et du Bassin du Congo.
The Republic of Congo and chair of the 7th session of the 47th Regional Africa Forum on Sustainable Development, and all the
His Excellency Mr. Albert Muchanga, Commissioner for Economic Development, Trade, Industry and Mining, the African Union Commission. Your Excellencies, Ministers and Heads of Delegation, ladies and gentlemen, a just and inclusive and green recovery is a priority for Africa. And in today's event, we are examining some of the key characteristics of this green recovery: renewable energy, digitalization, and nature-based solutions, and how they can be harnessed for inclusion and resilience in Africa. We are emphasizing these investments that are needed, as well as the mobilization of resources that are required. And these sectors in particular contribute towards a new dynamism for African economies. They can allow African countries to fully maximize the opportunities of the African continental free trade area and succeed in a green and inclusive recovery. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, before going any further, we would like to take a moment to just recognize two staff members of the Economic Commission for Africa and two persons who have contributed immensely to the African Regional Forum on Sustainable Development and who have unfortunately recently left us and have recently passed away. We would like to take just a moment of silence to recognize Sandra Nyaira and Sizo Mlanga, two dedicated members of the UN family who unfortunately have left us. We will start a moment of silence before proceeding with the program. Thank you to everyone for having observed this moment to recognize colleagues who have contributed so much to the path of sustainable development and who we stand with them today in this moment in this Africa Day. And I know this means a lot to a lot of our colleagues. In today's event, we will have three segments to our session. We will be starting with an opening session with welcoming remarks from the three co-organizers from the United Nations family. We will then have speeches by the presidency of the African Regional Forum on Sustainable Development and by the Vice President of the Economic and Social Council. And this will be followed by a keynote address by Commissioner Albert Muchanga. We will then have the sharing of experiences from ministers and heads of delegations from various member states, followed by a Q&A, after which we will have a short intermission with a video, and then we will proceed with the expert panel and interactive segment, where we will have the chance to hear the views of our dedicated panel of experts and focusing on solutions before having closing remarks. A few housekeeping remarks before we proceed. Firstly, to recognize that interpretation is available, and this is at the bottom right of your screen, and you can choose between English and French. We would ask all participants in the interactive sessions, if you would wish to take the floor, to please indicate this in the chat. And please also do not hesitate to actually write questions in the chat, as we will be addressing these as we go along. And this will help in the organization of an effective and interactive session. All participants will be muted during the entire event, except at the moments when they may be given the floor to speak. We would also like to announce that the event is being webcast on UN TV, UN Web TV, and the event program and the French and English versions of the concept note will also be loaded into the chat. So to start our proceedings, I have the pleasure to invite Her Excellency Ms. Cristina Duarte, the Under-Secretary General and Special Advisor on Africa, for her welcoming remarks. Mrs. Duarte, over to you.
Thank you, Jean-Paul. It's a pleasure to be with you again in an event. Excellencies, distinguished guests and colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. Good morning and good afternoon to all of you who are joining us remotely from different time zones today. On behalf of the UN Office of the Special Advisor on Africa and our co-organizers, namely the African Union Commission, UN Economic Commission for Africa, UN Development Program, and the African Institute for Economic Development and Planning, it is my great pleasure to welcome you all to the 4th Africa Day at the high-level political forum on sustainable development, which takes place under unique and challenging circumstances. In 2018, the co-organizers launched this forum as an annual event in response to a request by African member states made during the African Regional Forum for Sustainable Development the same year. The Africa Day at the HLPF has since served as a platform for African member states to share experience and best practices to overcome common challenges on the path towards the continent's sustainable development. As such, it complements the deliberations that takes place at the official VNR plenaries without being bound by a strict format. Furthermore, by bringing the outcomes and recommendations of the Africa Regional Forum on Sustainable Development to the HLPF, the Africa Day also acts as a bridge from the regional to the global level in making the Africa we want a reality. In this regard, the Brazzaville Declaration that was adopted by African member states during the last edition of the African Regional Forum on Sustainable Development calls upon African countries to redefine and develop economic models that incorporate the protection of natural resources, the promotion of renewable energies, the development of green and resilient infrastructure, and inclusive digitization, informed by awareness of the value of our human capital. This is the reason why the theme of our event today is the green recovery, renewable energy, digitalization, and nature-based solutions for inclusion and resilience in Africa. As the Secretary General has noted, in our response to the COVID-19 lies an opportunity to rethink how we approach growth and development, to improve our management of the environment and its resources, and to leverage the existing tools and knowledge to build forward, build greener, and build better. And this is a timely discussion, taking into account that the African Union will launch today a comprehensive green recovery action plan, which speaks to the core of the issues that we'll be discussing during this event and will provide the blueprint and leadership for Africa to recover from the pandemic and the consequent economic recession much stronger, greener, more inclusive, and resilient than ever before. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, if there is a tool that can certainly be a game changer in this context, it is digitization. Last year's Africa Day at HLPF took place when half of the world was in lockdown, and much of the discussions focused on the role that digital technologies could play in helping African economies and societies to leapfrog toward an inclusive, health, resilient, and peaceful Africa against the backdrop of the decade of action for the SDGs. 1 year later, the COVID-19 pandemic and its devastation are still unfolding. Moreover, the new variants are hitting many countries in Africa much harder. Against this background, we need to mobilize every resource, every capacity to support the response and start the recovery. And digitization has proved to be key for unlocking Africa's greatest asset, its human capital. Because, let's be clear, without strong human capital, we'll not achieve the swift recovery that is needed. There are two main lessons that we can take from the role that digitization has played in the response to the pandemic. First, the digital divide is not a threat anymore. It is a reality. Last year, while most of the world turned into teleschooling as a way to overcome the COVID-19 related school closures, 250 million African children in primary and secondary education were left out of school. That means that 250 million of African children will be from now 1 year behind their peers of other parts of the world. Similarly, most African countries were not able to implement telehealth solutions to continue providing assistance to millions of patients with chronic disease. These are two examples of how the digital divide is undermining Africa's human capital, broadening the separation between developing and developed countries, and threatening the continent's future. Second, despite this harsh reality, there is a hope. Africa has over 600 technological hubs. During the pandemic, we have seen a multiplication of innovations made in Africa that, leveraging digital technologies and the internet, have tried and in many cases succeeded to overcome some of the challenges posed by the pandemic and bridge existing gaps. However, in most cases, those have been civil society-led efforts. And if left only to the private sector and civil society, the kind of scaling up that is needed will not materialize soon enough. Repairing the damaged infrastructure and investing in dated technologies is no longer sufficient. Ending the digital divide in Africa requires multi-stakeholder and multi-sectoral engagements, an enabling regulatory environments, and innovative financing. This is therefore an effort that needs to be led by African policymakers. And it is a worthwhile investment. Digitization can, first of all, become a driving force for social inclusion, enabling access to public service for communities in remote rural areas. It can also be a catalyst for economic growth, unlocking the full potentials of Africa's useful and dynamic population. It is a fundamental tool for strengthening governance and enhancing public institutions' capacity to provide public service and to mobilize revenue. In this regard, I would like to invite you to take the opportunity that this Africa Day at HLPF provides to exchange good practices and come up with recommendations to put an end to the cycle of inequality and lack of access to digital skills and technology in Africa, which is the only way to scale up the continent's digitization and unlock its structural transformation. Before concluding, I would like to take the opportunity to thank cordially all our distinguished speakers and panelists for accepting our invitation and making time for this event, particularly the minister and representatives from African member states presenting their VNRs this year or who participated in previous years. I would also like to welcome and thank the other participants in this first session His Excellency, my dear brother, Albert Mushanga, Commissioner for Economic Development and Trade, Industry and Mining of the African Union, will deliver the keynote address. Her Excellency Miss Arlette Soudan Nuo, Minister of Environment, Sustainable Development, and the co-ambassador of the Republic of Congo and chair of the Bureau of the Seven African Regional Forum on Sustainable Development. His Excellencies Mr. Colin Kelapile, Permanent Representative of Botswana to the United Nations and Vice President of the 75th session of the Economic and Social Council, as well as the other co-organizers of these events. My dear sister Vera Songwe, Executive Secretary of ACA, my dear sister Hauna Eziakona, Director of the UNDP Regional Bureau for Africa, and my dear sister Ambassador Fatma Mohamed, Permanent Observer of the African Union to the United Nations. And without further ado, Jean-Paul, Adam, I wish you successful engagement at Africa Day and the HLPF, and I thank you all for your attention. Thank you very much. Back to you, Jean-Paul. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much, Madam Duarte. We really appreciate those remarks, which have emphasized the importance of digitalization in particular as a platform that can allow countries to maximize the opportunity of the demographic dividend for Africa. And it is an accelerator and one which we must ensure that there is African leadership around the digitalization and technology, and also ownership of these technologies. So thank you very much. It is now a great pleasure to introduce Her Excellency Dr. Vera Songwe, the UN Under Secretary General and also Executive Secretary of the Economic Commission for Africa. Dr. Songwe, you have the floor.
Allô? Allô? Oui, bonjour. Ça va bien, oui?
Good afternoon. Yes, I believe you are connected.
OTM, ok, mais sur quel chat?
I can see that Dr. Vera Songwe is connected, but I think for some reason she has not been able to take the floor immediately. I would just ask perhaps the Secretary to check the situation, and while we try to address that, if Miss Aruna is available, perhaps we could go to the next speaker, and I could invite Ms. Aruna Eziakonwa, UNDP Assistant Administrator and the Regional Bureau for Africa, to deliver her remarks.
Ça fonctionnera bien. Oui, oui. Oh. Okay, bye.
We can hear you perfectly. Yes.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for convening us there, Sister Christina Duarte, our Special Advisor on Africa. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, let me say all protocol observed. What a pleasure it is to be able to join you in this forum today. And I think the participation here really underscores the importance of this subject that we're talking about. You know, we have to say that the issues that were just laid on the table now by my dear sister Christina are at the heart of development on the continent. And it's such a pleasure on behalf of UNDP to participate in this 4th Africa Day at the 2021 HLPF. It has now become a tradition for us that as we gather here, we amplify the African narratives. We tell the Africa story on key development themes that arise from the Africa Regional Forum on Sustainable Development. So today we talk green recovery, renewable energy, digitalization, and nature-based solutions for inclusion and resilience in Africa, for inclusive development. So simply put, we interrogate how we can accelerate a green energy revolution for the transformation of the continent. So we do this because energy is, of course, foundational. We get SDG 7 right, we are well on the path towards prosperity for all, including um, protection for our planet. So renewable energy also has this synergistic effect on the entire socioeconomic and environmental spectrum that underpins the implementation of the SDGs and Agenda 2063. So my message today which will focus on renewable energy specifically, is the following. We have an unprecedented opportunity to pivot towards green development approaches that maximize the COVID-19 recovery, to take bold steps in that direction, steps that we've never taken before. At UNDP, we have made that leap in the launch of the COVID 2.0 offer, which we're calling Beyond Recovery towards 2030. We're working to help decision makers to make the right choices, to manage complexity, as well as uncertainty, because these are the hallmarks of the age that we live in today. And we're homing in on green economy as a core pathway for accelerated action on SDG 7, but also on several other SDGs. The COVID-19 pandemic has laid bare what we risk when we delay investment in critical sectors like energy, food, digital infrastructure, among others. And the renewed attention to strengthening productive capacity on the continent for vaccines, for example, is really welcome. And countries like South Africa, Egypt, Rwanda, Mauritius, and others are leading the way in really shaping the capacities for this to happen, and they deserve attention and support. But to succeed, we need energy. We need renewable energy, and energy is that oxygen for production. So we're now all too familiar with the numbers. In Africa, 600 million people require access to electricity. 900 million people do not have access to clean, safe fuels and technologies to cook, heat, or even light their homes. Both of these statistics speak to an immense investment opportunity. Decarbonizing the global economy is the greatest challenge of our time. Africa holds the key and creates one of the biggest opportunities for quick wins in decarbonization, because of its starting point. But it also needs the right level of investment to make that contribution. So furthermore, I think the importance of energy goes beyond the economic rationale, which a lot of people home in on today. It drives the provision of social services like health, education, and safe cooking. So now there are concerns about whether Africa can transition to green and clean energy at this time without suffering immeasurable setbacks, given, of course, the COVID-19 pandemic and its impact, given the limited financing that's available and the need to preserve jobs. So a transition to renewable energy away from fossil fuel dependency will be disruptive and carry inherent risks of inequity vis-a-vis the poorest segments of our populations. We need to take this on board. So we must therefore prioritize social protection and insist on what we now call just transitions. The African Development Bank estimates that to meet Africa's energy needs, over $500 billion investment is required until 2030. And there are other estimates, but overall, the numbers are big. So how do we meet these demands? I think we need to work together to redirect finance and private investment towards access to sustainable energy. An important starting point is the COVID-19 response, which we should take as an opportunity to work to work together with communities to really co-create new energy systems. The Africa Continental Free Trade Area and its one market presents opportunities for enhanced intra-Africa trade in renewable energy products and also services, which can anchor a green industrialization. There is also a role for international development agencies. And let me maybe share a few examples of the work that UNDP is doing in this regard. First, we're speeding up investments in distributed renewable energy solutions, targeting those hardest to reach. We must continue to focus on that group of people who are often left behind. And we aim to increase access to clean and affordable energy for all, at least 55 million people by 2025. The Africa Mini Grid program is another one. It's quite encouraging because it looks at private investments, lower tariffs, and expanded service, thereby improving the financial viability of renewable energy mini grids in 18 countries. The UN's renewable energy offer for the Sahel, which was just launched, focuses on increased access to clean energy in the Sahel, and UNDP is working with within that context to support Sahelian countries to reap the potential of their renewable energy resources for sustainable development. We have a good opportunity here under the UN integrated strategy for the Sahel, currently being led by the Secretary General Special Coordinator, Mr. Martier. UNDP is investing in energy for productive use as well, electrification of health facilities, solar for health programs, for instance, energy for displaced populations and fragile contexts, and also energy access in small island development states, a very important input. And we're expanding strategic partnerships. We cannot underestimate the importance of partnerships within and outside the UN, with financial institutions, for instance, with the private sector actors and with others, like, for instance, the Sustainable Energy for All, that is now leading on many of these fronts. As we head towards the Secretary General's high-level dialogue on energy to be co-chaired by the UNDP administrator, Ms. Damilolo Gumbi, who is the CEO of Sustainable Energy for All. And following a recent principals level meeting that we held under your leadership, Madam Duat, I think there is need to increase energy generation, resource mobilization for SDG 7, ensure that human rights mechanisms are linked to enhancement approaches, enhance capacity for energy investment planning, and also enabling conditions, and also harnessing the interlinkages between energy and key productive economic sectors like agriculture. As I conclude, AU projects like the Plan for Infrastructure Development, PIDA, remain key guiding points, and we will continue to work closely with the AU, with AUDA, NEPAD, with AFDB, and other key stakeholders. And I look forward very much to listening to all the views today. Thank you. Over back to you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ahuna, and thank you for sharing these perspectives, and in particular, the role that energy plays as the energy for production and being linked to the key productive sectors, and therefore the need for rapid upscaling and investment for us to really achieve the sustainable development goals, and at the same time, a huge opportunity for decarbonization and in Africa, recognizing that Africa is not yet locked into a number of these carbon-intensive technologies. So I think we now have hopefully managed to sort out the technical issue, which would allow Dr. Vera Songwe to make her welcoming remarks. I would like to invite Dr. Songwe to take the floor, and I would kindly ask the technical team to make sure that that her mic and her video is enabled, because I think that was the problem previously. Dr. Songwe, if you could try to speak.
WhatsApp audio.
Oui.
So we are trying to sort out this issue. I am in contact with Dr. Songwe, and she is saying that she's trying to connect.
Allô? Oui, oui, oui. Comment? Non, non, mais tu sais, l'orateur n'est pas là, hein?
So please, I would ask the colleagues on the technical team, because Dr. Songwe has just called me, she's connected, but she's unable to unmute her mic.
D'accord.
So there's obviously a technical issue from the
Elle va
perspective
parler en D'accord.
the host. And so I would ask if the host could try and do that. And I'll give it 1 minute to try and resolve that. And the issue that Dr. Sangwe is facing is that she's being told that when she tries to unmute, it says that she's not able to unmute herself.
Okay, it is mute. Attends.
So thank you very much. I will ask the technical team, please, to look for Dr. Vera Songwe. She is connected. She just called me to confirm. Perhaps her name is listed as ECA or similar. And I would ask the technical team to look at that. And in the interim, we shall move to the next speaker to avoid wasting too much time. And we apologize for this, difficulty. And I would now allow to proceed. And unfortunately, I've also been informed that Her Excellency Minister Arlet Soudan-Dono has had some difficulties connecting. So therefore, I would like to invite His Excellency Mr. Colin Kelapile, the Ambassador and Permanent Representative of Botswana to the United Nations and Vice President of the 75th session of the Economic and Social Council to deliver his remarks. And we will then revert to Dr. Vera Songwe and to Minister Arlet Soudan-Dono when they are able to connect. We apologize once again for those difficulties. And thank you very much, Ambassador Kelapile, for your flexibility, and I give you the floor.
No, thank you very much, distinguished moderator, Mr. Jean-Paul Adam, Director, Climate Change, Natural Resources Management and Technology Division of the UNECA, Excellency Minister of Environment, Sustainable Development, and the Congo Basin of the Republic of the Congo, and Chair of the Bureau of the 7th Africa Regional Forum on Sustainable Development, Ms. Arlet Soudan-Dono, USG Special Advisor on Africa, Ms. Cristina Duarte, and Undersecretary General and Executive Secretary of UNECA, Ms. Vera Songwe, ASG Director, Africa Bureau, UNDP, Ms. Ahuna Asiakona. Ladies and gentlemen, I am indeed honored to participate in this virtual Africa Day at the 2021 HLPF event, both as a fellow African First and in my capacity as Vice President of ECOSOC at its 2021 session. Ms. Ahuna has already taken the lead, and she has indeed eloquently elaborated on the theme of this year's event. And my job, of course, adding also to Ms. Cristina Duarte, who also set up the scene quite clearly. My job is simply therefore to continue also on that trail to set the stage and highlight some of the achievements and also note some of the gaps in the implementation of both the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and Agenda 2063, including best practices and areas that still require support and partnerships. Distinguished moderator, while the COVID-19 pandemic was initially slow to reach the African continent as compared to other parts of the world, the infection rate has grown exponentially in recent months, and it continues to rise as we speak. According to WHO, COVID-19 cases are doubling every 3 weeks, and the pandemic has exposed the existing vulnerabilities and the challenges linked to fragile health systems, lack of inclusive and sustainable development, and has widened the socio-economic inequalities. In fact, by setting forth the worst economic recession since the Great Depression, the pandemic has erased and in some cases reversed decades worth of the hard-fought development gains. For instance, it is now estimated that the pandemic will increase the number of the people living under extreme poverty by an additional 119 to 124 million people globally, leading to an increase in extreme poverty rate for the first time in a generation. According to the World Bank, more than 1/3 of the new poor are regrettably in sub-Saharan Africa, and 8 out of 10 are in middle-income countries, which includes my own country, Botswana. In other words, the socio-economic impact of the pandemic has been very severe on the African continent. In this regard, the way to end the pandemic and prevent its spread is to dramatically slow the transmission of the virus. And this can be done through the widespread vaccination, which must be underpinned by equitable access by all. There is absolute need for a comprehensive, coordinated strategy, focusing on increasing the global supply of all COVID mitigation tools through investment policies and redistribution of excess doses, as well as facilitating the production of vaccines in developing countries themselves. Post-COVID-19 era also dictates that African countries must scale up investments to ensure that everyone's basic needs are met and fully met, in fact, by prioritizing socio-economic advancements in health, education, and better standards of living by 2030. Notwithstanding the limited resources and the competing priorities that our countries face, governments must invest in medium and long-term technical programs that support innovators and entrepreneurs through capacity building for more resilient and inclusive societies. On the socio-economic front, policy measures should cushion income and job losses, reduce dependence on external financial flows, and develop knowledge-intensive economies. Distinguished moderator, despite the challenges we face, it is important for Africa to also approach this pandemic as an opportunity to reset our economies in order to grow faster, stronger, and more resilient. The continent must focus on furthering economic diversification, boosting industrialization, regional integration, and trade facilitation under the ambitious framework of the African Continental Free Trade Area, AFCFTA. The potential in the AFCFTA must be leveraged to strengthen the energy sector and improve the use of the continent's abundant renewable energy resources in order to meet the enormous demand. African countries still suffer, unfortunately, from the large deficit in energy generation and distribution, resulting in frequent power outages as well as unreliable networks. Chronic undersupply of secure and affordable electricity is indeed a barrier to growth, food security, job creation, and poverty reduction. It limits Africa's prospects for industrialization and mechanization of productive sectors, including agricultural value chains. In the most recent World Bank Doing Business 2020 report, customers in 10 of the 24 African participants, which represent 42%, reported that they experienced on average at least 24 hours of outages over the period from May 2018 to May 2019, while 19, which represents 79%, reported that they experienced at least 2 hours of outages. In comparison, only 5% of European countries had customers experiencing at least 24 hours of outages, while Asia reported 13%. Therefore, Africa must make a choice to invest in both traditional, centrally managed grid and off-grid technologies to achieve sustainable energy supply. While off-grid electricity production is gaining traction, it should not, however, be seen as a cure for all these challenges. Instead, African countries must balance their investments into energy efficiency and appropriate technologies to meet household or domestic demands vis-à-vis industrialization goals. Moreover, since Africa's energy resources are not evenly spread across the continent, it necessitates investment in cross-border or transnational energy generation and transmission projects to provide equitable access across the continent. Nature-based solutions underpin sustainable development, as they factor in the importance of harmony between people and nature, as well as ecological development. In this regard, I call upon African countries and development partners to scale up nature-based solutions for mitigation, resilience, and adaptation in key areas to ensure that the citizens' livelihoods in the face of climate threats, including the conservation and restoration of freshwater resources, forests, and other terrestrial ecosystems. Good governance has been identified as the main driver of the systemic transformation needed to achieve all the SDGs. The importance of goal number 16 on peace, inclusive societies, access to justice, and effective, accountable institutions is key to effective and successful national response to the COVID-19 pandemic in promoting an equitable, just, and sustainable recovery to build resilience towards future shocks and crises. Distinguished moderator, in an effort to close the gap between aspiration and implementation, prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, I'm aware that the African Union developed the Digital Transformation Strategy for Africa for the period 2020 to 2030, which articulates the potential of digital technology as a driver of innovation, economic growth, and job creation in many sectors of the economy that will allow greater interconnection of African markets with one another and the rest of the world. The strategy goes further to articulate the potential to strengthen both market and financial access for all, especially those marginalized by the traditional financial institutions. The strategy also notes that digital technology will maximize impact in sectors such as health, energy, transport, agriculture, education, and facilitate access to basic social services consistent with broader good governance and development policies and programs. Allow me to underscore that it is very clear that Africa should focus on both institutional and human capacity building as main drivers to address implementation gaps in the continent. That is the gulf between well laid out plans and the actual delivery to the people who need the services. On the other hand, the moderator, Africa needs to strengthen multi-stakeholder partnerships and platforms involving international organizations, including the African Union and the United Nations system. All actors from governments, civil society, youth and women organizations, academic institutions, and the private sector have a key role to play in the ongoing and future efforts to improve social services and other life-sustaining infrastructure focusing on improving human capital. In conclusion, Mr. Moderator and distinguished participants, I wish to reiterate that for Africa to move forward faster and systematically in the post-COVID-19 era, African countries must adopt the principle of multi-stakeholder partnerships with a comprehensive angle on technical assistance, capacity building, and inclusive policy dialogue. I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Kilapile, for your remarks, reminding us also of how all of the Sustainable Development Goals are interconnected, and that good governance is particularly important as well in terms of achieving the SDGs, among numerous other points that you have underlined in relation to how we can accelerate progress towards the SDGs. So, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it appears we still have some technical difficulties around the connection of Dr. Vera Songwe, one of our previous speakers. And in that context, I would like us to proceed directly to the keynote address. And I have the pleasure, therefore, to invite His Excellency, Dr. Muchanga, who will be delivering the keynote address today. And Dr. Muchanga is representing the African Union Commission that have been key partners with the UN system in terms of accelerating development in Africa, achieving the SDGs, and also in particular in terms of using the African Continental Free Trade Area as a lever to accelerate sustainable development. And we very much look forward to hear his perspectives and that of the African Union Commission in relation to achieving a green recovery, and particularly as the African Union is about to launch the Green Recovery Action Plan. So Commissioner Muchanga, welcome. Thank you for being with us, and we look forward to hearing your remarks. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Moderator. And I'd like to begin by saluting all the excellencies who are here and the other participants in this forum, and with all protocols duly observed. And I greet each and every one of you, wherever you may be. Here it's in the afternoon, other parts of the world, it's in the morning. On behalf of the African Union Commission, we convey our deep condolences to the UN family, especially the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, on the loss of 2 officers. May their souls rest in eternal peace. I think I'm meeting the new Undersecretary General for Africa, as well as the Special Advisor on Africa for the first time. I worked very closely with the previous Undersecretary General, and I look forward to working with you as well as we move ahead in the mutual interest of developing Africa. And I'm very, very happy to be in this forum this afternoon. And the issues of green recovery, digitalization, renewable energy, and nature-based solutions for inclusion and resilience in Africa are very, very, very important. And their importance is heightened by the fact that they all build on the 7th session of the Africa Regional Forum on Sustainable Development which convened this past March in Brazzaville, in the Republic of Congo. Right from the beginning, I can indicate two areas where the African Union is working vis-a-vis the theme before us this afternoon. One is on stopping deforestation by transitioning towards renewable energy, especially solar energy. And the other one, as indicated by the previous speaker, is on the implementation of the African Union Digital Transformation Strategy. And I can give two examples here. One of them is that under the agreement establishing the African Continental Free Trade Area, work is underway to come up with a protocol on e-commerce and e-trade. And then the African Union Commission and the Secretariat of the African Continental Free Trade Area are also working together jointly to lay the foundations of establishing a digital market for Africa. When you're looking at the theme, we at the African Union, I don't know if it can be taken as a pessimistic approach, but we see that the underlying factors in the realization of this theme are very, very complex. They may not be easy to resolve. And therefore, as we move towards a green recovery, we should be very clear that it's likely to be quite slow. And we begin this by looking at the year 2020, which really marked an extraordinary time in human history. And that was driven by the COVID-19 pandemic. And everybody agrees. This pandemic disrupted.
Cette pandémie a perturbé
the global and national economies,
les économies mondiales,
as well as many areas of socio-economic activity.
A perturbé les principales activités économiques.
And in so doing, the pandemic undermined.
Et la pandémie a miné les activités économiques.
And these adverse impacts
ces effets indésirables
can be seen on increased
peuvent être constatés dans la phase de mise en place, mise en œuvre des plans.
Poor business performance in many countries.
Nos performances économiques dans de nombreux pays.
And consequently increased.
Et en conséquence ont augmenté des conséquences négatives. Et les deux exemples que je voudrais citer ici,
in 2020,
en 2020, l'équivalent à 255 millions de travaux d'emploi à temps plein ont été perdus.
And an additional 101 million
et 101 millions d'enfants et de jeunes sont en plus régressés et sont tombés en dessous du seuil d'alphabétisation.
Thereby wiping out the
ce qui a éliminé tous les progrès qui avaient été effectués en éducation ces 2 dernières décennies.
According to the 2021 UN Secretary General's report on the progress of sustainable development goals,
le rapport du 2021 du secrétaire général,
the pandemic-related economic downturn,
la pandémie,
119 to 124 million more people into extreme poverty.
A engagé dans la grande pauvreté un grand nombre de personnes supplémentaires.
And in the same report,
et dans le même rapport,
we are informed that the crisis also
nous a informé que la crise a également eu des conséquences sur les inégalités qui ont augmenté.
And here I can add that,
et je pourrais ajouter que le problème de ces inégalités,
populations are reacting
les
through
populations réagissent de façon...
Right now, as we speak, there are a number of processes
Maintenant, il y a un
in
nombre
many
de
countries
processus
of
en cours dans certains
growing
pays
inequality.
qui augmentent les inégalités
And these, if they continue, can undermine stability.
et qui vont finir par miner la stabilité de ces pays.
The view of the African Union is that some of the means of
L'opinion de l'Union africaine là-dessus,
have also been
cette mise
by the COVID-19 crisis.
Cette phase de mise en place va être complètement révolutionnée par l'effet de la pandémie du Covid-19.
One can, in this respect, give an example of the
à ce sujet, on peut donner les résultats des investissements qui ont souffert de ce...
which declined by 40% in 2020.
Avec un recul de 4% en 2020.
In addition, global merchandise trade also fell by 5.6%.
Les investissements étrangers ont réduit de 4,6%.
In our view, the health,
selon nous,
consequences of the
les
pandemic
socio-économiques conséquences et en santé vont encore peser encore plus sur la situation et vont peser sur le développement durable et la résilience.
De
même, l'impact régional de la pandémie du Covid-19 pour l'Afrique, un recul dans la demande globale, des reculs dans le commerce mondial, de même que pour la demande nationale provoquée par le confinement et ont été très négatifs. Surtout pour les petites entreprises et les activités informelles. Avec une grosse proportion de femmes et de jeunes qui sont touchés par ces impacts. Dans le passé, nos gouvernements sont engagés à certaines réalisations, des buts et pour l'agenda 2063 de la part de l'Union africaine et les objectifs de développement durable des Nations Unies. Il est très clair maintenant que les progrès vont être amoindris à cause de la pandémie de la COVID-19. Et la longévité de la crise va nous indiquer la profondeur des problèmes et des impacts négatifs globaux. La crise prolongée va menacer sérieusement les progrès réalisés pour ce qui est de l'accomplissement de l'agenda 2063 et des ODD au niveau national et locaux, particulièrement si
And as we go towards the third wave, there are also expected negative developments that would bring in more lockdowns and continued economic and social dislocation, maybe this year, in next year, and possibly beyond. And in order to ensure inclusivity, it is important to put equity and inclusion at the center of emergency responses, as well as post-COVID-19 recovery plans. And the COVID-19 pandemic has also heightened Africa's heavy dependence on imports of both final and intermediate pharmaceutical products. The export restrictions on personal protective equipment and later vaccines enforced by some countries consequently put the continent in a very vulnerable position, as well as a reminder that Africa has to develop internal capabilities or competencies, not just in this sector, but other sectors as well, in order to really promote some level of self-sufficiency. As an immediate response, concerted efforts are urgently needed to ensure equitable access to COVID-19 vaccines and other treatments, as well as strengthening the financial positions of developing countries. The last point is critical to ensuring recovery of the momentum towards attaining the commitments in the 2030 Agenda as well as the Agenda 2063. In the view of the African Union, the ability of governments to respond effectively and achieve sustained recovery will also depend on the availability of data. It is, in this respect, encouraging that many national statistical offices, both global and in Africa, have adapted quickly to the challenges and played a major role in the COVID-19 responses of their respective governments. This notwithstanding, the COVID-19 pandemic has increased critical funding gaps in national, regional, and global statistical offices. This brings to light the urgency of effective mobilization of international and domestic resources in support of data management to guide evidence-based decision-making, especially in these areas. The COVID-19 pandemic is above all a call for enhanced multilateralism. The COVID-19 pandemic cannot be overcome if countries work in isolation. In this connection, more and enhanced multilateral cooperation is required to overcome the pandemic. More than ever before, we need effective multilateral institutions in the very areas of peace and security, trade, investment, economic integration, humanitarian affairs, health, as well as the issues of green recovery, renewable energy, and digitalization covered in the theme for this Africa Day event. For Africa to be well positioned on the follow-up on the recommendations of this event, and this is where we say you may find us a little bit more or less pessimistic. Our view is that the first step is to ensure increased supplies of vaccines to immunize against the COVID-19 pandemic across Africa. For as long as this is not done, and for Africa, we currently have less than 3% of the African population vaccinated, and talk of recovery and resilience becomes doubly challenging. I'll stop here and thank you for your kind attention. I yield the floor, moderator. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, Commissioner Muchanga, for those remarks, which have outlined how the African Union Commission is engaging and supporting countries for the green recovery. And I think particularly focusing in terms of the first step is around access to vaccines, because this is one of the prerequisites to allow countries to also be able to invest in other parts of their economy. If they can't protect their own populations, then they will struggle to also address the other priorities in relation to a green recovery. So thank you very much once again, Commissioner. And we will now be proceeding for the interventions from member states and from representatives that wish to make some remarks. We have some that are have already indicated their availability. And we regret that for the moment, we are still not able to connect some of the previous speakers, but if they are able to join us later on, we will then go to their remarks. But in the interim, we will be proceeding with the remarks first by the Minister of Environment and Sustainable Development of Madagascar. Je voudrais inviter Son Excellence, Madame la Ministre Rahirinin, la Ministre de l'Environnement.
I would like to invite Mrs. Baomi-Awatsevainala Hararinirina. I would like to give you the floor. Mrs. Minister. I think that Mrs. Minister is duly connected, though we're waiting for her to take the floor. while Mrs. Minister doesn't take the floor.
Mavima, who is also the current member of the Bureau of the 7th ARFSD, and he's the Minister for Public Service, Labor and Social Welfare of Zimbabwe. So Your Excellency, Minister Mavima, you have the floor.
Thank you, Jean-Paul. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, Director of Ceremonies, ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to address you at this very important event, the 4th Africa Day at the high-level political forum running under the theme, The Green Recovery, Renewable Energy, Digitalization, and Nature-Based Solutions for Inclusion and Resilience in Africa. Zimbabwe recognizes that the achievement of the mutually reinforcing agendas of Agenda 2030 for Sustainable Development, which is the UN agenda, and the Africa Union agenda, Agenda 2063, is underpinned by the availability and sustainable utilization of clean, renewable energy. Zimbabwe has vast and diversified renewable energy potential, which needs to be effectively harnessed to create a sustainable energy portfolio that can contribute to the development agenda as enunciated in our Vision 2030, which seeks to achieve an upper middle income status by 2030. Successful harnessing of clean energy sources will also contribute to the country's initiatives aimed at reducing greenhouse gas emissions, which is a major step in fulfilling our commitment to the global community. In this regard, our government launched the National Renewable Energy Policy in 2019, which is aimed at increasing access to clean and affordable energy. The policy augments our national vision through promotion of investment in the energy sector. The policy sets overall targets for renewable energy in the country based on the nationally determined contributions as one of the primary objectives in line with the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Under this policy, the country targets to improve the installed capacity of renewable energy, excluding large-scale hydropower, from the current 5% to 27% by the year 2030. Zimbabwe at present is mainly dependent on petroleum, on coal, hydroelectric power, and fuel wood to meet its energy demands. More than 60% of the population still rely on solid biomass fuel for thermal needs and have no access to clean energy sources. Yet our country has vast renewable energy resources, such as solar, hydro, biomass, and to a limited extent, wind and geothermal that to date have largely remained unexploited. A number of programs have been implemented to promote the adoption of renewable energy technologies, such as National Energy Policy, Sustainable Energy for All programs, the National Biogas Program, rural electrification using solar mini grids, and climate policy, which was put in place in 2017. The country is in the process of developing fiscal incentives for solar-powered vehicles and has incentives in place for solar batteries and the related accessories. The liberalization of the electricity market has resulted in the government granting power generating license to a number of independent power producers in an effort to encourage new investments, especially by private investors in the sector. The Rural Electrification Agency installed 525 mini-grid systems at rural institutions, including schools and clinics. And each system has a capacity of 0.84 kilowatts, giving a total of 441 kilowatts. During the fiscal year 2019 to 2020, 100 kilometers of transmission lines were installed and 210 kilometers of distribution lines were installed. As of 31 July 2019, the Zimbabwe Energy Regulatory Authority, known as ZERA, had issued more than 77 power generating licenses, with 42 being solar power projects. These initiatives are aimed at improving the share of renewable energy in the overall energy mix and addressing issues of climate change, enhancing social welfare through community development, gender equality, and employment promotion. The private sector is also actively involved in the promotion of the green economy in line with SDG 7.3, which seeks to double the global rate of improvement in energy efficiency by 2030. The Confederation of Zimbabwean Industries has coordinated an energy efficiency award, which is meant to promote more efficient use of energy. The CZI, which is the Confederation of Zimbabwe Industry, also has Clean and Green Initiative, which is meant to promote sustainable and environmentally friendly practices at enterprises level. And this includes the use of clean energy. A number of businesses across all economic sectors are proactively investing in renewable energy, which is consistent with SDG 7.2, which seeks to increase substantially the share of renewable energy in the global energy mix. The gaps in renewable energy production presented above provide an opportunity for public-private partnerships, which are necessary for development. The main challenges to the agenda of renewable energy production are the financial resources to invest in such capital-intensive projects and the ever-present threat of the COVID-19 pandemic. It is therefore an opportune moment to exploit the huge energy potential to meet Zimbabwe's growing energy demand, achieve universal energy access, and secure the country's long-term needs in a sustainable manner. With regard to digitalization, the COVID-19 pandemic has made it increasingly difficult for governments to provide services physically, as the need to digitalize services and improve online accessibility of these services. This will entail deliberate policies which are aimed at enhancing access to the internet by the majority of people, especially those in remote areas. Issues of cyber security should also be enhanced to protect online data from cyber attacks, which can cause serious harm to our countries. In fact, Zimbabwe is currently working on a cybersecurity bill, which should pass Parliament in a few weeks. In conclusion, I would like to encourage fellow African countries not only to prioritize the promotion of renewable energy, but also to harness the advantages brought about by digitalization as we build forward better against this COVID-19 pandemic. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister, and for flagging the opportunities for renewable energy based on the experience of Zimbabwe, and which can also form a real opportunity for investment across the continent. And it is important, of course, to have the right framework for independent power producers, using the example of Zimbabwe. I think this is something which can be looked at in the context of many other countries across the continent. And of course, we have to upscale that level of investment significantly to be able to be on track in relation to the sustainable development goals. We would now like to invite His Excellency, the Minister from Egypt, His Excellency Dr. Ahmed Kamali, the Deputy Minister of Planning and Economic Development of the Arab Republic of Egypt. Dr. Kamali, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. I want to, in the beginning, thank the African Union, the OSAA, ECHA, and the UNDP for organizing Africa Day. And I want to welcome all our brothers and sisters from all African countries participating in this important event. Excellencies, Egypt has presented its third VNR this year. In 2018, Egypt presented its second VNR, which was very well received and commended by international community. Despite a short period of time since 2018, however, many developments have taken place culminated by COVID-19 pandemic. 2021 VNR has very important issues and messages. So let me share with your excellencies a few of them. First, the government of Egypt was proactive since the onset of COVID-19, with policies centered around three main themes: protection, mitigation, and resilience, striking the difficult balance between life and livelihood. Second, there are always opportunities in each challenge. Egypt has launched the second phase of reform in 2021, focusing on improving productivity and galvanizing the supply side. This was with the help and support from the IMF and also from the OECD. Third, a localization of sustainable development. This is a very, very important issue. It is the key to deal effectively with development gaps in various regions in Egypt. And I think it is true as well in all our countries in Africa. And this is through funding and measures to improve local competitiveness. I want to also to draw your excellencies' attentions to that we also had a side event on the localization of sustainable development this high-level political forum in this year. And it was from, and we have a participation from different countries. We have participation from China, India, Brazil, and from Kenya as well. So I think it's very, very important to focus on the issue of localization, because with the difference and the difficulties facing the different regions and striking differences in terms of the developmental gaps between the different regions within even each country, it will be a very important thing to focus on how to localize sustainable development in different regions. Fourth, we are finishing the updating of the Egypt Vision 2030. Egypt Vision 2030 is the national version of the 2030 agenda. Now, one of the important reasons that we did this, or we initiated this update, is to better align with the 2030 agenda and Africa 2063. And at the same time, take into account the new challenges that have arisen in the last 3 or 4 years. fifth point that I want to share with you, Your Excellencies, that in Egypt's VNR 2021, we reported on the measures taken to deal with the challenges identified in the 2018 VNR. We, in the 2018 VNR, in addition to reporting on the progress of the different goals within the 2030 agenda, we also identified, and this is very, very important, the major challenges in front of the achievement of the SDGs. And we have identified in 2018 a number of them: data, finance, governance, and the high population growth. In the 2021 VNR, we also have identified other challenges in front of the SDGs and the implementation of the SDGs. The digital divide, the low level of women participation in the labor force, and the multifaceted environmental challenges, like, for example, the climate change, land degradation, and water scarcity. Now, there is an important also point that was very much emphasized in our VNR, that there was a major stress on the importance of information technology and digital transformation. ITDT, this is just for abbreviation, and how it could be a silver bullet to solve persistent problems in Egypt. Like, for example, excessive government bureaucracy and transaction costs. These things or these problems could be minimized by the diffusion of information technology and digital transformation in government services. Also, the information technology and digital transformation would improve governance, would improve health and education services, even social protection, by targeting the pockets of poverty and by improving the targeting system in order to reach the most vulnerable in the country. It is important to emphasize that failure to domesticate the information technology and digital transformation to our needs, and here I'm not only talking about Egypt, I'm talking about Egypt as well as African countries, would create the opposite effect and impede the achievement of our vision. Lastly, partnership to achieve goals, whether we are talking about local, within the country, or region, for our country, for our continent, Africa, or the global. All stakeholders should work together in order to create a climate of peace and collaboration in order to achieve our vision and the 2030 agenda, and leaving no one behind. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, Minister, for Egypt's contributions to this very important subject, and in particular, the focus on aligning national plans with the SDGs and Agenda 2063. And may I also take the particular opportunity to thank Egypt for sharing their experiences through the regional VNR lab. And I think this kind of peer-to-peer sharing of experiences in the continent is precisely what we want to achieve through events such as the Africa Day and through the high-level political forum process generally. So, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we have the opportunity now. If there are some member states that wish to take the floor, please flag in the chat. but we also have some Q&A. We will briefly take about 10 minutes to cover some questions, and there are two that I would like to flag. Firstly, there is a question about the role of social protection and the need to reaffirm this social protection in the context of the pandemic, recognizing that marginalized groups are often further marginalized. And the example given is in relation to persons with disabilities. And this has been posted by the representative of the African Federation of the Hard of Hearing. So if any of the ministers would like to intervene in response to this, I would perhaps suggest Minister Mavima, if you are available, you might wish to give some thoughts on this. We can also have the input from other ministers. There is another question in relation to how we can use the African Continental Free Trade Area to improve energy access across the continent. Minister Mavima, can I go to you in relation to either of those two questions?
Yeah, let me, Jean-Paul, thank you. Let me address the issue of social protection, especially to the most vulnerable groups in our countries. When COVID-19 struck and there was need for containment and there was a lockdown, and I'm using the example of Zimbabwe here, we had no option but to come up with programs that would maintain livelihoods among especially the most vulnerable. So immediately, government, for those, for example, who are living on the street, government established safe houses. But we then also continued with our support to the institutions that house vulnerable people. But we extended also support to the non-formal sector. And you find that a lot of our people who operate in the non-formal sector are also disabled. So we then extended support to the non-formal sector. Monthly cash transfers were established. And in addition to that, we also enhanced our social protection programs that were already operational. So containment measures for COVID-19 necessitated that governments come up with resources to go and support livelihoods among vulnerable people, including those with disabilities. It was not easy. Resources are always limited. What we did as government of Zimbabwe was to make sure that people had the basics, the basics in terms of cereals and maybe oils and some vegetables to ensure that people continue to survive. We wish we had more resources so that we could maintain the levels that people were surviving on prior to the pandemic, but it was not possible. We also benefited from the work or the complementary work that was done by the World Food Program, for example, in our urban areas. Government carried the bulk of the burden, but WFP also helped us to make sure that we maintained livelihoods in our urban areas. I think an estimation is that we spent in 2020 something like 240 million US dollars on social protection programs, especially necessitated by the COVID-19 pandemic.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. I would be interested to also hear the views of Dr. Kamali from Egypt. We've got some additional questions that have come up in the chat, including how young people can benefit from digitalization and the green recovery, and how we can situate this in the plans that African countries are putting forward. It would be very interesting to hear the experience of Egypt. And of course, if you want to address the issue of energy as well, please feel free to do so.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Let me first just in the beginning say a couple of things about social protection, because this is a very important issue. The first thing that we want to say that indeed COVID-19 has produced lots of challenges to all countries, including Egypt. And what we did in Egypt, we have followed in the beginning a very pragmatic approach in order to tackle the issue of social protection in the context of COVID-19. So, as I said, we had three themes: the protection, mitigation, and resilience. So what we did in the beginning is that we have tried to identify the groups which are more affected or adversely affected by the pandemic. So to give you a very quick example, so the informal sector, the informal workers, if any shock, any negative shock happens, the first one they're going to be rid of are the informal workers, and this is true in Egypt and true elsewhere. So what we did is that we have the government, under the auspices of His Excellency the President, we have initiated a program in order to protect the informal economy or the informal employees. So what we did is that we have, and this is an example of how we can use technology. We had started a portal where people can kind of register very, very basic information about them, and by looking at their information, we disperse some cash transfer to them each month. Now, this has two effects. First, is that you are protecting these vulnerable groups who are very much adversely affected by the pandemic, and at the same time, you are helping the government in order to gather important information on these people in terms of the kind of job that they get into, their kind of background, their education, and so on. And this is, if you created this immense database of informal workers, this could be a very important thing in order to design the right policies in order to deal with this very important problem. And by the way, in 2019, we had a very important side event on the issue of informality, which I think is very, very important, not only in Egypt and for all African countries. This is for the first kind of part. Now, you talked about there is this question about the youth and digitization and so on. I think if you look at the level of unemployment among youth, I'm talking about Egypt and in Arab countries in Africa, you're going to see that the ones who suffer the most in terms of unemployment is the youth. And this is simply because of the imbalances in terms of the labor market between the skills needed and the people who kind of graduate from the education system. So what we did is that we have now a very big focus on technological universities and on vocational training. This is very, very important because it's, this is the future. The future is technology, the future is digitization. And the youth are the most kind of equipped kind of segment of the population who can deal with these technological changes. So we need to, as much as possible, we need to equip the youth with the needed skills in order to venture into this new era of digitalization. This is extremely, extremely important, and this is something that we are kind of implementing, and we have programs in order to enhance the content of digitalization, not only in terms of the universities, also at schools. Now we have this system of education 2.0. Now, irrespective of whether we're talking about private or public schools, what we have is now we have a new system where students, they have tablets and everything is electronic. Now, in a way, we are not only, helping them in terms of jobs and so on, but from the onset, from the beginning, the way that they are being educated is by the use of technology and digitalization. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Honorable Minister. I think we've heard from both Minister Mavima and yourself, first of all, the importance of immediate social protection for people affected by the pandemic, and that has included around cash transfers and supporting those who are most at risk. And I think we can also recognize that there is information gained from those interactions because you are able to identify those who are the most vulnerable, but also identify the gaps in the market. And this links with the challenges that young people are faced with. They are the most affected by unemployment, reflecting the imbalances in the labor market, and investing in technological solutions, including digitalization, are part of addressing this labor imbalance and having a new approach to education in the long term, which allows Africa to make the most of its demographic dividend by turning its workforce towards these digital sectors. And that leads to the investments that we have talked about in the context of a green recovery, which is towards, for example, the renewable energy aspect, which can help people access affordable energy in a systematic manner. There's also the link with nature-based solutions, which can also provide quick employment opportunities associated with the rehabilitation of nature, and therefore contributing towards a green recovery and improving inclusion. So I think these are some of the recommendations that we can take from the ministerial session and how we can translate these key areas into strategies for a green recovery and an inclusive recovery. So Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we are now moving to the next segment of our event. And we will, before we proceed to the expert panel on solutions, where we will be approaching four African experts to share their perspectives on what are the areas that will make the most impact for a green recovery, building on all of the interventions that we've heard from the policy space from different ministers and representatives of governments and international organizations. And before we go to that expert panel, we will have a brief intermission with a video which will show the journey from the ARFSD in Brazzaville to the High-Level Political Forum in New York and accelerating sustainable and resilient recovery. So we can go ahead to screen that video. We regret there seems to be a problem with the sound. I would ask the technical team if you can try to correct this, because I think there is a problem with the sound. A few people have indicated they are not able to hear, and it's certainly the case for my own connection. I think because the sound is not working, I think we need to pause it and possibly restart. I will ask the technical team to try to restart the video with sound. And if unfortunately then it doesn't work, then we shall have to move on. The sound is still not working. So colleagues, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I think in the circumstances, I think it is better that we move on because there seems to be a problem with the sound. We shall make sure that this is available on our website, on the website of the ECA, but also of the OSAA, and so that people can have access to it in other formats. And we apologize for that, and we are unsure as to why this is not working. And if the technical team are able to get it working, then we can proceed, but otherwise I think it's better we move on. We will do one last try.
Nous espérons que les investissements en infrastructure, évidemment l'énergie, mais aussi les technologies de l'information et de la communication feront la base de cette nouvelle avenir que nous voulons construire ensemble. Nous nous réunissons aujourd'hui ici, effectivement sur le thème « Mieux construire l'avenir ». Et cela exige de ne pas accepter un retour au status quo. Nous avons appelé cette conférence « Comment construire l'avenir? How do we build forward better ?»
One of our biggest challenges to fight COVID-19, but also climate change, is to find solutions that are rooted within communities and societies. And nature-based solutions offer us some of the best opportunities to do so. Where an environment is degraded, that environment can be rehabilitated, for example, through reforestation. And that reforestation improves the ability to preserve water resources. The work that the UN ECA is doing is ensuring that they opportunities that we are building for industrialization in Africa are contributing positively towards reducing the burden of climate change. That means looking at the most recognize that first and foremost, this means connecting as many people as possible to electricity grids. So by building on energy, we are linking with all of the other sustainable development goals as a starting point. And work on SDG 7 is therefore the key to building back better and ensuring that there is a green recovery across Africa.
This camp, we call it the hybrid continental coding camp. The reason we call it hybrid is because we have in-person girls that are from Addis Ababa who are sitting in the UNECA hall, but we also have other girls who are connecting online from Africa. So this coding camp, it's a collaboration between ITU, which is the International Telecommunications Union, and the UNECA. And the main aim is to try to bridge the gender digital divide that we're seeing, especially in Africa.
J'aimerais demander aux Nations Unies de continuer dans cette lancée-là. Ce genre de forum doit se faire dans toute l'étendue du territoire, dans tout le pays, pour que les jeunes se rendent compte de l'importance de la technologie dans nos vies. Déjà que c'est un domaine incontournable et surtout que ça se passe chaque année de façon perpétuelle pour que ça puisse profiter à la jeunesse comme on le fait et que les gens se rendent compte que voilà, la technologie elle est incontournable.
As we listen to the voices of the world's young people, the time has come to make peace with nature. This means developing a just economic model that embraces renewable energy, green and resilient infrastructure, inclusive digitalization, and protects natural resources. In 2021, we must bring the full potential, know-how, assets, and political expertise of the UN development system behind UN country systems in support of a more inclusive, equitable, and sustainable future. The challenges ahead are significant, but Africa continues to overcome challenges, and it is now the region of greatest opportunity and possibility in the world. With the power of women, young people, cutting-edge technology and innovations, Africa can drive the transformative change over the next 10 years. We have to believe it is possible, and we have to convince others that it is so. The United Nations will remain our steadfast partner in this pivotal moment in building a better future for all.
Thank you very much. And we trust that everybody enjoyed this brief presentation of some of the tangible actions that have been done in the context of applying the recommendations of the African Regional Forum on Sustainable Development, and particularly in the difficult context of COVID-19, which is impacting all states. And we've seen some of the practical solutions that have been put forward to try and address this, as well as the need to dramatically upscale investment in those key areas which have been identified and which are the focus of today's session. So now we would proceed to the expert panel, which is the third session of our event, the expert panel in the interactive segment. We have 4 panelists who I will invite in turn to make a brief introductory statement, supported in some cases by a few slides. And after which we will have a Q&A, which I will take questions that will be from the chat, as well as general questions that can help us in terms of facilitating the conversation. We will start by introducing Dr. Edith Madela Mentla, and she's from the Department of Family Medicine of the of the University of Pretoria, and she holds a doctoral degree in mental health nursing, and she also holds a senior management development program from the University of Stellenbosch, and she's currently senior lecturer and senior researcher at the University of Pretoria, where she heads the community engagement for health research. We very much look forward to hear her thoughts around not only the health side, but in terms of how African countries can respond to the challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic in the context of organizing themselves and building resilience in the longer term. Dr. Edith, we have the pleasure to invite you to start with a few remarks, and then we'll follow with a few further questions. Dr. Edith, over to you. Dr. Edith was connected before. I'm not sure if she has been disconnected. If it appears that she's not able to speak in the immediate, I'm not too sure why, but in the interest of time, therefore, I will go to our next panelist. And our next panelist is Mr. Rene Awembeng, who is from the African Export-Import Bank, AFREXIM Bank. He's an experienced international banker, considerable expertise in trade and commodity finance. He's a regular commentator on current trends in commodity trade finance, regional business, African trade and infrastructure development. And he has worked for many years in various banking jobs and is currently in the AFREXIM Bank. So, Mr. Awembeng, we'd love to hear your thoughts based on the work of AFREXIM Bank of how we can support a green recovery on the continent in the context also of responding to the COVID-19 pandemic. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Greetings from the African Export-Import Bank. And we all hope you are keeping very well and safe in these challenging times. It's a pleasure to be invited to speak at this high-level panel on sustainable development. So despite the very minimal contribution to global greenhouse gas emissions, African countries are very highly vulnerable to the adverse effects of climate change and the associated economic impacts. This vulnerability is exacerbated by existing developmental challenges. And according to current estimates, the negative effects of climate change are already reducing Africa's GDP by about 1.4%, and the cost arising from adaptation to climate change are set to reach an annual 3% of GDP by 2030. So all African countries in particular will require substantial climate finance flows to address the climate mitigation and adaptation needs. With the signing of the Paris Agreement in 2015, the African Export-Import Bank's member states overwhelmingly committed to building climate resilient and low carbon economies through their national determined contributions. So in this effort to facilitate the transition of the member states and other key partner stakeholders towards a greener economy, the African Export-Import Bank has developed a climate finance strategy, which is aimed at mainstreaming climate-related opportunities and risks across our financing activities, delivering on the bank's mandates to promote intra-African trade and export of non-traditional goods and services, while supporting progress on key sustainable development goals. The bank's climate finance strategy represents the first step in setting the bank's aspirations to become a significant climate finance actor, and serves as the basis to eventually adopt a wider sustainable finance framework, which would measure the bank's contributions to the achievement of SDGs more broadly. The bank's CFS aims to position the bank to scale up its investments and deploy additional resources to align with the global shift towards low carbon and climate resilient growth. The climate finance strategy is supported by 4 pillars to define and serve as the basis for the bank's sustainable finance framework. These 4 pillars are bridging the finance climate gap, developing green finance expertise, striking a balance for green growth, and creating green partnerships. Each of these pillars is supported by specific themes, as well as strategic objectives, initiatives, and key areas of intervention, which the bank is actively working on. Afreximbank's market position, its product mix, human resource capacities are the key factors expected to facilitate the attainment of the strategic climate finance objectives through the provision of debt facilities, either to trade or project financing, guarantees, project preparation facilities, or advisory and capital market services. So we are intervening and have identified the renewable energy and energy efficiency sectors as the initial sectors of focus to reduce the dependence of traditional fossil fuel to support Africa's energy and infrastructure aspirations. Both renewable energy and energy efficiency are crossing sectors that can be applied across sectors such as transport, logistics, manufacturing, infrastructure, power, telecoms, amongst others. According to a recent study by the African Development Bank on the energy report, ramping up renewable energy capacity on the continent requires approximately 30 to 60 billion of annual financing. Constructing and rehabilitating grids and extending connections to new customers also offers significant energy efficiency investment opportunities. Sustainable infrastructure development is also key to enhance the competitiveness and facilitate industrialization and export development while reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Such investments stand to benefit the continent in laying the foundations to build back better from the current COVID-19 crisis by creating more sustainable, resilient economy and inclusive growth.
Mr. Awambeng, could we, because I realize, that we only have so much time, could we perhaps summarize in another 2 minutes? And then we'll come back to some of these other points. Thanks.
Thank you. So the African continent has a great potential to build a low carbon future, and the bank is proud to be in a position to support its member states, stakeholders, and partners in achieving a climate-aligned economic recovery and long-term growth. To realize these low carbon objectives and facilitate Africa's economic transformation, Afreximbank will continue to build on its successful programs and interventions in inter-African trade, industrialization, export development, which include climate-aligned origination, risk assessments, and capacity building. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Awambeng. Mr. Awambeng is the Global Head of Client Relations at Afreximbank. And we particularly appreciate this intervention because we need to look at ways which we can upscale finance. And I think you've mentioned quite a few areas in which the bank is working to try and address this and also crowd in the private sector while working with governments. We'll now go to Dr. Fatima Denton, who is the director of the United Nations University Institute for Natural Resources in Africa, currently based in Accra and Ghana. She's a former member of the ECA, where she had been since 2012, where she was involved in various roles, including natural resource management, as well as coordination of the African Climate Policy Center. She has expertise in climate change and natural resources. And I know that the United Nations University has recently done a very interesting report on green recovery pathways. So we're very interested to hear from you, Dr. Denton, your key thoughts on this matter. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Jean-Paul, and it's great to be part of these conversations. So let me see if I can frame my my thoughts into three or 4 points. I think it's very interesting that we are talking about green recovery and also about the potential that we have in Africa. I think those points are very hard to dispute. What I think we need to also factor into our conversation is not necessarily a when question, because a green transition we must move towards, but it's a how issue. So I think that the quality of the transition will matter, the pace of the transition will matter, the speed of the transition will matter. There is also quite a lot of messages around the investment opportunity that we have in Africa. So I think we need to also dig a bit deeper into what that means. We know that electricity demand between 2019 and 2040 will principally come from emerging markets. I think the question we now need to ask ourselves is whether Africa can do this double leap. There's been quite a lot of conversations about the potential for Africa to leapfrog. And I might even go a step further to say that Africa has perhaps one of the largest, I'd say, transformational potential in terms of a leapfrog. First, because I think we've mentioned this already in this conversation today, that when it comes to developed countries and their economies, they're already locked in. So there's already a lock-in factor that they're faced with. We don't have that burden because we don't have a lot of the infrastructure that we will now have to custom design to ensure that we're moving towards a low carbon development. So in a way, we are starting the transition from a very clean slate, a very green slate, I might even add. I think beyond that, there is a sense also that this is a continent, as has been mentioned, that has a huge potential to deploy a vast amount of renewable energies. Several of these renewable energies, many countries are already, I would say, taking the lead and could almost be classified as a kind of mini revolution in terms of what they have actually done in this move towards democratizing renewable energy. But I think beyond that, there is a sense that if we are going to commit towards a massive deployment of renewable, we have to ensure that this is something that we do in concert with support from the international community, the global international systems have to be part of this. But I know in Africa we are very much a holder of this potential that I mentioned, and we could actually support mitigation ambitions elsewhere. Because if we mitigate now, then it would mean that the rest of the world may not have the problem of 54 countries in Africa taking advantage of their fossil fuels and tapping into those fossil fuels. So the potential for us to mitigate now, I think, is going to be quite fundamental, and therefore the need to ensure that we're not doing this in isolation. In actual fact, when we talk about carbon neutrality, it's very hard to talk about carbon neutrality without Africa being part of that carbon neutrality strategy. The word carbon neutrality in itself is a very loaded word, but that's another discussion. The second point I will argue is about how we in the continent prepare ourselves. So I would say that the investment opportunities are there, but the preparation needs to be aligned with the investment opportunities. What do we do to enable these transition drivers? What do we do to enable the continent that already has huge endowments in strategic minerals, for instance? We know that these strategic minerals are going to be fundamentally useful if we're going to scale up renewable energy technology. They hold a great promise for the continent, but we shouldn't just, stay in that kind of romanticized narrative of a promise. The promise has to be actualized. How we actualize the promise is what the debate is about. There's a talk about how these industrial revolution. There is a sense that we're going to need 6 times more iron. We're going to need steel production if we are going to service wind turbines, for instance. That's a fact in itself. We're going to need 70 times more the current production of copper is going to be needed if we're going to generate more electricity, especially clean energy. So it opens up a tremendous market opportunity. There is also the fact that we have the African Continental Free Trade Area. This is the largest market connecting, 55 countries with potentially trillions of dollars to be had. So that again is a possible area that we can tap into. Now, we can't talk about this debate, as I said, in a romanticized manner. We have to talk about the spoilers. What are the spoilers? The spoilers are, we as a continent have already huge amounts of oil and gas and coal. Coal, oil and gas are part of the problem. But we haven't eaten into this carbon budget. The carbon budget has been already eaten into quite significantly. So how do we ensure that if we are going towards a low carbon development pathway, that we do so in a manner that doesn't sacrifice the transition for justice, that the element of justice is going to be fundamentally important, and that we don't focus on winning a mitigation race at the expense of doing what is just. Many of these countries in the developed world have developed on the basis of these coal and gas and oil industries. Is it now time to see how we slow down? Do we adopt a kind of road analogy where those countries that are already very far advanced in terms of the carbon emissions take a bit of a back seat, or maybe even support the countries that haven't actually had the time to take advantage of their resources? So these are difficult conversations. How do you tell a country like Namibia that they can't really mine what they have in terms of copper or bauxite? When you talk about the Okavango basin, how do you tell countries like that? How do you tell Tanzania and Uganda that their crude oil pipeline cannot be exploited? How do you tell Senegal that it cannot take advantage of its natural gas potential? These are the issues that I think we need to talk about. And lastly, Jean-Paul, I would say, we can't even begin to talk about transition and a low carbon development if we don't talk about agriculture. This is our Achilles heel. We talk about energy because it's very visible. But agriculture, this, if we do it well, could be the breadbasket of the continent. A continent the size of Africa can actually feed the world. So a sustainable agriculture offers a lot of win-win. We can find ways of ensuring that we're doing soil conservation better. We can find ways of ensuring that we are going to be more involved and more invested in terms of efficient water management strategies. And this could be our gateway to green industrialization. Our productive capacity in the continent is already quite low. So if we invest in agriculture, if agriculture is part of the prime, I would say, candidates or prime sectors for a green industrial revolution, then this is where we are going to now have to put a lot of effort into, especially since most of our emissions are in this sector. So we need to repair, we need to rebuild, we need to restore, and we have huge deficits in this area. So our capacity to repair and to rebuild and restore and renew are in the investments that we put, not just in the energy sector, because the energy sector is a problem, but the agricultural sector is both a problem and a solution. So I'll stop there for now, Jean-Paul.
Thanks so much, Fatima. If I could go back to you for the first question, and then I will go to Renee for a question on financing. So you stressed the importance of a just transition and of making this a reality for Africa. And I think you've given very interesting example, particularly on the agricultural sector, which is perhaps the key for unlocking this just transition, because it's a question of industrializing in a sustainable way in the food production sector, for example, as a catalyst. But do you think there's a danger that African countries repeat the mistakes that other countries have made? And is there a danger of locking in technologies that then may become obsolete?
We have to avoid investing into sectors now because, you know, the oil and gas industries and all of that is very tempting. But we do have to avoid that incredibly tempting option of taking advantage of what we have and then coming back to clean later. I think that has associated health cost. It does mean that we could be more or less on the margins of development because the world may not wait for us. It also means that, you know, and this is already happening, some of the developed countries are going to relocate their dirty industries here, and they're going to do it right in their own countries. You know, so these are real opportunities. I think building back better and not making that mistake. I am very much confident of the fact that this is a continent to be envied. I've actually said so a few times because it's quite green. So I think that because it's a continent to be envied, most other countries would like to look like Africa. What we need now is the formula, and that formula we don't have on our own. The rest of the world have, you know, an incredible opportunity to invest into that. There is enlightened self-interest. You know, it's a no-brainer. So they have to find ways to ensure that Africa is actually doing mitigation for its own sake, but it's also doing it in support of the rest of the world. Our mitigation problem is the world's mitigation problem. You know, if we, I mean, our emissions problem is the world's emissions problem. So we need to really invest in better mitigating now so that we can be there much ahead, you know, and be there in a much more comfortable way because we have all of these enablers that can help support us. But we can't do it alone, you know, and it would be unfair to actually, that I think is at the heart of the just transition discussion. The just transition discussion is about how do we ensure that we are not at the periphery looking in, but we are rather supported in ways in which we can take this debate further. And there's a cost element to it. And the rest of the world has to realize that, you know, support needs to come from the rest of the world. That is at the heart of a just transition.
Thanks so much, Fatima, for those insights. Renee, I'm going to come back to you afterwards on a question as to how we can increase private sector investment in these key areas. But I've understood that Dr. Edith is now connected. Dr. Edith, who is a mental health expert, but is also leading the charge in terms of transdisciplinary approaches to sustainable development. So we very much look forward to hear her perspectives. Dr. Edith, over to you for 5 minutes of remarks, and then we'll follow up with some questions. And if you can share with us your perspectives on how we can address a green recovery in Africa. Dr. Edith? Dr. Edith was just connected a moment ago. Unfortunately, I think we all realize that when people are connecting from across the continent, this is sometimes some of the challenges that we face and one of the main challenges that we need to address. So Dr. Edith, unfortunately, I think she was connected for a moment, but I think she has been disconnected again, unfortunately. If she is there, please just take the floor and we'll proceed. So I'll go back to you, Renee. If you can give us an indication, how do we upscale private sector financing in particular into these key areas of renewable energy, of digitalization, nature-based solutions? How do we improve that access to finance from the private sector?
Thank you very much. So as the continent strives to reduce its dependency on traditional fossil fuels and get into renewable energy and energy efficiency, the role of the private sector is very, very important. And I think that we as the development bank can work with private sector players either by one, helping to build capacity in training, in advisory, in providing them with access to solutions, how to move away from these fossil fuels into new energies. Secondly, we can also help with a number of financing tools. We have a number of financing products in our either intra-African trade, industrialization, or export development programs, where we can support private sectors, SMEs, African corporates, financial institutions to be able to play a role in originating, developing energy projects, in renewable energy projects. Also in green partnerships, we can work with the private sector and some of our development partners in green partnerships. We've worked with some of the DFIs to able to put financing packages. I would like to cite the example of the AFD, where we have a program for about $250 million to support private sector on the continent. So we are open to explore all avenues of working with the private sector to enable and ensure that we move away from traditional fossil fuels into more renewable and efficient energy solutions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So the idea is to ensure that there is specific availability of finance that pushes the private sector into these areas. And perhaps as a follow-up afterwards, we could hear about some of the incentives that might need to be put in place to allow that to happen. But first, we'd love to hear from Maximilian Jarrett, who's from the International Energy Agency. He's the Africa Program Manager in the Office of Global Energy Relations from IEA. So Mr. Maximilian Jarrett, we'd love to hear your thoughts on what are the best ways in which we can accelerate a green recovery in Africa. Over to you.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me. Could you just give me a thumbs up you can hear me? Because I'm not sure. Brilliant. A lot has been said, and I agree with all of it, especially that I quote what Fatima was saying, and also what the colleague just said. I'll speak from a bit of an international perspective, as although I'm an African, I'm at the IEA. And the key thing really that I think we should focus on right now is what's it going to take to make it happen, especially the financing and the investment. And IEA put out a report just a few weeks ago, which we published in collaboration with the World Bank and the World Economic Forum, on financing clean energy transitions in emerging markets and developing economies. And one thing that came out very clearly from that is that the world as a whole is awash with money, but the money is not flowing in terms of clean energy investment scale up to those countries which really are the global priority. For example, Africa is one key area. And we say there needs to be actually a global tripling of annual clean energy investment by 2030, so in 9 years' time, to more than $4 trillion US. And much of that needs to flow to Africa. However, it's not getting there yet. And it's not just the scale and the flow of the funds, but even where money is going to Africa, the cost of financing is so high. And we saw that looking at assessments over the COVID period, renewables has been rather robust. People have still been investing in solar and these kind of things on the continent. Yet what they have to pay in terms of the financing for their projects is much higher than other parts of the world. And so it's clear that in terms of bang for your buck, if you really want to move fast in terms of the clean energy transition globally, putting much more money in Africa now would take you much further, faster than putting that same $5 in an advanced economy. So we now all need to collectively, both as Africans, but also our partners internationally, make the case for this scale up of funding to the continent. And at the same time, we also need to be looking at, from an African point of view, what needs to be done from our side to make the regulatory and enabling environment right to be able to absorb that money which we say we need. And again, that takes partnerships, not just about government, but the African private sector, and we had a colleague just speaking there, the African banks. You know, the whole issue of financial intermediation in the clean energy space needs to be at the forefront so we make this happen. And then thirdly, coming back to what Fatima was saying, we've got to remember though that all of this, even in terms of investment in human capital and so forth, is important because it must be people-centered. This is a painful transition. It's painful in terms of jobs, in terms of impact on economies and so forth, to use it doing things a certain way. And the pain is being felt, not just by our environment, but by our people. But we have the potential in Africa. We have the potential, and now just to make sure that putting people at the center, investing in our human capital so we can grow this as fast as possible is what we've got to do. And I'll just stop there for now, but I think I'm really enjoying the conversation. We're on the same page. The key thing is now internationally, how do we all make this happen so that we're doing it for Africa, not as a favor to Africa, but we're doing it actually for the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Max. And I think, as you pointed out as well, the idea is that we create opportunities through these investments, and we should be doing it for the right reasons. It's to help the citizens of Africa. We're not doing it just for the mitigation reasons, even though that impact is there. So I now would like to go to Dr. Edith, who I believe is now successfully connected. Dr. Edith, I'm delighted to be able to introduce you as a real leader in terms of the transdisciplinary approach to sustainable development. So I will stop there and go straight to you to hear your thoughts on how we can address a green recovery in Africa in an inclusive way. So over to you, Dr. Edith.
Thank you very much. I'd like to greet and honor all the excellencies in the room, in the connection, basically, and all the colleagues. Good morning to everybody. So, green recovery, where are we as Africa? I have a set of slides that I would like to use just to set the scene. Can I please have them on? I asked for them to be projected by the meeting. Yes, because now I'm connected on the phone. I've been disconnected so many times on the laptop. I've decided to connect on the phone. So I'm juggling a bit.
They're just about to come on the screen now. I think everyone can see them. So please proceed.
Thank you very much. So can you please move to the next slide? So I'd like to actually talk in terms of the reality that the UNDP has drawn our attention to. This follows a study they did with the Paddy Center for International Futures. Very, very interesting outcomes indeed, where they're looking at 3 scenarios. But basically, one of the conclusions that were made here is that COVID could drive the number of people living in extreme poverty to over 1 billion by 2030. And this is the target by which we want to have achieved maximal human development. And they say with 250 million pushed into extreme poverty as a direct result of the pandemic. Very concerning. However, they say an ambitious but feasible set of integrated SDG investments can lead to potential, or can have a potential to exceed the development trajectory the world was on before the pandemic, and even take us further to actually achieve beyond what we had projected previously, like before we had the pandemic. Can I move to the next slide, please? Yeah, so I actually put on this graph, which gives us the 3 scenarios, but the 3 scenarios are actually being compared to the pre-COVID development projections in light blue. Now, if you look at the other 3 lines, the line above the light blue is the line that shows poverty lines with the onset of COVID. COVID has come and actually opened up a gap between what we had projected and what we're actually seeing now. And being in Africa, especially sub-Saharan Africa, we know that we are very vulnerable in terms of technology to fight the disease, in terms of diagnostics, in terms of the treatment, and also in terms of poverty generally. So we are in the high damage area of the graph. If you look at the red line, it actually predicts that by 2030, we are very likely to have more than 1 billion people living in poverty. And by 2050, we won't have done much. We won't have achieved much difference. But if you look at the green line, the green line is what is predicted if we inject green recovery into our development strategies. And in that case, we are very likely to reach even levels of poverty that are below what we had projected before COVID. Now, this is food for thought. If one thinks about where we are in terms of implementing green recovery, at the moment, Africa is quite behind. And if one just looks at what we should be taking advantage of, we are only responsible for about 6% of green gas emissions. And in fact, we should be taking advantage of this. We know that we're very guilty when it comes to using, I'll say, dirty energy, because we still use quite a lot of it. But if one looks at the role of green recovery now, and how it can increase resilience and inclusivity, you look at the creation of green jobs, for instance. Quite often they are looked down upon because they need so much more investment. But if you create green jobs, you'll actually achieve a lot of inclusivity, and you'll achieve a lot of resilience in terms of human development and the planet itself. And if you look at energy security, you're much more likely to get a lot of energy security because if you resort to green energy. And that way you're going to strengthen resistance. If you look at digitization, we're talking about creating a smart economy, but to what extent are we actually putting investment into digitization so that we can create the smart economy? And here I include the knowledge economy, things like working remotely. We need to invest into the infrastructure that will enable people to work remotely. We need to automate a lot of our processes. We're still very manual in the way we're working. We need to facilitate contactless transactions. We know that with the advent of COVID, there's a lot of advice in terms of avoiding contact interactions. Now, if you look at nature-based solutions, we do need to form smart investments, investment opportunities, and these we need to create natural means of achieving what we want to achieve. Investment that create green and clean jobs, investment that can deliver value for people, that can look at boosting economies and nature. And what we need to do is to accelerate whatever we're doing now. And I can assure you that there are examples of what's happening in Africa in terms of green economy, green recovery. Countries like Rwanda have become very exemplary in terms of having examples of projects that invest in green recovery. And in a sense, increasing people's resilience and inclusivity. If you look at the forestation project, for instance, banning plastic bags, and looking at policies that are integrating human development and ecosystems development, those are some of the good examples that you find on the continent. Now, where is our biggest problem as a continent? It's especially in terms of financing. But how do you mobilize finance that's available and not available at the moment for us to be able to invest in green recovery. We know that there are international instruments of financing that are such that they are tailor-made to promote green recovery. But to what extent are we taking advantage of those? We probably are not. There are green funds that a lot of governments have created. And to what extent are we actually promoting the interaction between the sectors to make sure that we use those green funds as a good investment? The private sector has a very good potential to invest. However, between the private sector and the public sector, sometimes there is such a disconnect that you find that the funds that are available are not being used for the good of the development. To what extent are we mobilizing internal finances as countries? Because as Africa, we're not necessarily poor. We've got lots of resources that we could be using profitably and in a smart way, in such a way that they will assist us to achieve our goals for green recovery. But we're going to need to really think hard and shift budgets from where we are investing in things that are not sustainable, and make sure to invest even more in green recovery efforts. A country like South Africa, for instance, has a very grand strategy for green economy. But to what extent are we actually making sure that there are budgets to finance that strategy, that policy? A lot of countries do have very good intentions, but the crux is actually in the implementation and mobilizing enough funding to actually fund that implementation. Coming from academia, I can't help but mention that I do see academics as a very important stakeholder, in that they can help you to actually implement all the good strategies that you have on paper, but you don't have the means or the know-how to implement. So if we work together as sectors, and I don't mean only academics have that ability, but governments need to tap into all the stakeholders and different sectors so that all the expertise that come from the different partners can actually be pulled together in an integrated way to achieve green recovery. I'll stop there, Chair.
Thank you very much, Dr. Edith. And I think we're going to come back to a few of the points that you've raised, particularly about the disconnect sometimes between the public and private. And there's some also very interesting follow-up questions that are coming in the chat, which I will take up with the panelists in a moment. And please keep the questions coming. But before we proceed, I would just like to invite His Excellency, the Ambassador of Japan, to take the floor. Ambassador Kimura, if you can give us a few remarks. You had asked to speak, and then I think it's interesting. One of the themes that has also emerged is that of partnership, and that Africa needs to mobilize its own resources, but it also needs to partner. So we'd be interested to hear your thoughts on a green recovery in Africa. Over to you, Ambassador.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. And I'm very pleased to address this timely and important meeting on the green recovery in Africa, harnessing the renewable energy solutions and digitalization. Japan expresses our support for Africa's inclusive and resilient digital transformation and energy innovation towards the goal of the 2030 and 2063 agendas. I thank also the panelists for their insightful remarks. As we all have experienced, COVID-19 has spurred massive changes in how the world works, learns, and does business. And these changes have been deepening the reliance of every country on digital infrastructure. However, despite its substantial renewable energy resources, more than 500 million people still live without access to electricity in sub-Saharan Africa. It is clear to us all that without power, there is no internet, and no internet means no digital transformation. Furthermore, the pandemic has been widening gaps and inequalities across the continent, affecting all sectors, including health, food security, gender equality, livelihoods, and poverty reduction. It is clear to us all that addressing the remaining more than 500 million people without access to electricity is a fundamental prerequisite to unlock human potential of the continent as a pressing global issue. Japan values human security as the cornerstone of Japan's foreign policy. And this is why digitalization and green transition will be a key theme of TICAD 8 to be held in Tunisia next year. Furthermore, promotion of investment financing, harnessing public-private cooperation is indispensable. For its part, Japan is funding the development of equality energy infrastructure throughout a number of activities such as the JBIC Facility for African Investment and Trade Enhancement. TICAD 8 in Tunisia next year will aim at setting out the pathway for African development in the post-COVID-19 era, making full use of the unique dynamism emanating from the private sector. At the same time, COVID-8 will serve as an avenue for supporting a free, open, and rules-based international order, and thereby bringing further prosperity and stability to Africa and to the world, together with Africa as a global partner. Against this background, my delegation would like to pose the following questions to the panelists. To accelerate and scale up renewable energy deployment and deployment of innovative technology in Africa, what are the most important changes that will need to take place within the energy industry and its supply chain? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, and thank you for those questions. And we'll be interested to hear the views of the panelists. And I would also like to invite them to look at some of the questions that have been posted in the chat. There is a question about bankable projects and the perception of risk by investing in Africa. Perhaps I could go to Renee first for a very quick response to this, and then perhaps followed by Max. And I would addressing the same question. And I'd also like to invite Fatima to look at the question around, there's a question around, is there a database on conservation and natural resources in Africa? And there was another question which came on a little bit earlier about monitoring and evaluation. And perhaps you could look at that element as well in responding. And we'll come to you, Dr. Edith, after as well. And of course, addressing the questions from the Ambassador of Japan. So we've got about 15 minutes to go. And so I'd like each panelist to touch on some of those questions, the ones that you feel are most relevant for your field. And please also feel free to come in with policy recommendations that you feel would be the most relevant. I'd also just like to mention to everyone that some speakers for technical reasons couldn't speak. We will circulate their speeches. Among those, the speech of the Executive Secretary will be posted in the chat. And as soon as we have the speech of the Minister from Congo, that will also be posted, and it will be available also on our websites. We will also be sharing a link to a brief survey in the chat, and we appreciate all feedback. So I'll start with Renee in terms of responding to some of the questions that we put out there. Renee, over to you for 2-3 minutes. Or if Renee is not able to speak, perhaps I'll go to Max first.
Sure. Thank you very much, Jean-Paul. I think, again, so much has been said that it's really, we're all on the same page. Great to hear from the Ambassador of Japan, because I'm pleased to be working with some colleagues from the Japanese Ministry of Foreign Affairs and governments of Nigeria, Senegal, and South Africa, some particular issues regarding advancing the decarbonization and the power sector, energy sector transformation in those countries. So it's great to hear from him there. I think what I'd like to focus on is basically, when you talk about risk and how we get more money in and so forth, it's the role and the mandate of international financial institutions. You know, they already have a mandate, but maybe we're calling now for a renewed, stronger strategic focus for them to step into that space and unlock the door where maybe, you know, there's talk about not enough bankable projects, or the projects are not fit for purpose and so forth, or there's issues of risk and risk mitigation. Many of the tools are there, but I think there's a need now for an increased priority and sharpening of focus for the role of those institutions the role they can play to really help move us forward. And if they're able to do that well, that will crowd in the private sector financiers and so forth. But then also, it's not just regarding projects that are about, for example, solar, wind, and so forth. There are other investments that we can be making, we should be making, that are going to be key to our green recovery and our green growth. Issues around energy efficiency, issues around clean cooking, something I'm passionate about. Clean cooking is not just making the cooking more efficient, it's health issues there also, gender equity issues there also, freeing up women's labor to be more creative and so forth in the economy. So, and finance has a key role to play in that. People like the AFSD, African Development Bank, key role, European Investment Bank, the World Bank, they all have a role to play to be the ones who can, in a way, as I keep saying, help to open up the game again, to allow more people to come in. So what's the role really? What role can they be now playing that really builds on the mandate they already have to elevate the game? And then again, other issues, not just investments in projects, but issues around energy efficiency, clean cooking, and so forth. I'll stop there.
Thanks so much. The tools are already there, as you say, but we have to deploy them very judiciously, and that involves as well capacity building. Let's go to Fatima in terms of the what are there any tools in Africa for that look at issues such as conservation and protection of resources, and how do we deploy these in the context of monitoring and evaluation of how resources are used across the continent?
Can you hear me? There's a message.
Perfectly.
Okay.
I can hear you very well.
Now, I'm not exactly sure about the databases that the question was referring to. I know there's an African conservation project, and there are other types of databases around GIS-based tools, that are looking into issues around aquatic resource management. But I think that aspect of databases is perhaps the problem. we need to be better at keeping good records of what we have. This transition is going to be complex, but it's also going to be quite challenging if we don't know what we have. I mentioned earlier about the fourth industrial revolution and how some of the rare earth minerals, the green minerals, are going to be useful. But unless we know exactly what we have, we're not going to be able to take full advantage of these resources. So that aspect of mapping our resources, the geological mapping, but it's not just about mineral resources, it's also about other resources that we have, that we can also exploit and mine, but provided we know the extent of these resources. I mean, put it differently is that we need a proper valuation of our resources. These are mineral resources, ecosystem resources, for us to take full advantage, even in terms of the Sustainable Development Goals, for us to be really able to reduce the implementation gap of the Sustainable Development Goals. We need to know exactly what we have, because part of understanding what we have is that we can deploy this properly, and we can then have some sort of a risk register. We can know exactly what resources we're most likely to run out of, and how do we then take advantage of that. So I think that for me is, and monitoring and evaluation is fundamentally useful. We're not also a continent that does monitoring and evaluation. Sometimes it's mentioned in our projects and we have a feeling we do it for others, but we have to do it for ourselves, So how we monitor, how we evaluate, our own evaluative thinking about these resources is going to be quite critical.
Thank you so much, Fatima. I think that, and there's potential ways in which we can deploy technology to address these issues as well in terms of monitoring and evaluation, increasing the efficiency. Dr. Edith, I'd like to come back to you. You've spoken a lot about the importance of social inclusion and that being essential to essentially allow a green recovery. And you've also spoken about the challenges in terms of mobilizing finance. And how do we ensure that financial resources actually reach those that need them the most? And I think this is something that a lot of African countries are struggling with. And it is one of the biggest challenges around, for example, how we use stimulus to properly invest for the future while we are protecting people immediately, but also creating an investment in the long term. Grateful for your thoughts.
Yeah, I know this is quite a huge challenge in Africa, because even countries that are well off, in a sense, relatively, than others, you find that they are not making investments where they should make investments, or when they do make investments, it actually they actually miss the point in terms of reaching the population groups that need the investments a lot more. So, in my view, we've been very guilty, not only in Africa, worldwide, of coming up with policies and strategies that are very attractive, quite often that are put together by experts. But you find that consultation on the ground hasn't really happened. So we need to be in touch and be sensitive to the needs on the ground. What do the people in the rural areas need? What are the things that work for them, and what doesn't work for them? What are the needs of the youth? What are the needs of women, who are really the pillar of every population? So we need to be really on the ground and build some of these policies from the ground up, and let them be informed by the reality that's of what's going on the ground. You also mentioned the monitoring and evaluation as part of the process, and that can never be underestimated. You can't evaluate what you are not measuring. So we really need to look at what the inputs are, what the processes are, and what the outputs are that we expect to get. Otherwise, we'll just fumble and actually waste resources. And I think my own country, South Africa, has been criticized quite a lot in terms of this, because we're not necessarily a poor country, but somewhere along the line between the input, process, and output, something is lost. So what we do need is to make policies that are well informed by the reality. We need to implement those policies, not just make them for policy's sake, but come up with implementation strategies that are looking at the realities. And then, of course, we need to mobilize the resources that are going to support the implementation, because otherwise you're just going to fall flat if you don't put resources that will implement, that will support the implementation. And then, of course, you need to measure what you are doing, so that from time to time you can have some introspection and look at where you've gone wrong, where you've done things better, and where you need to make amends or improvements, or else we'll just fumble and waste resources if we don't. And the issue of financing is actually a very important one, because our governments, especially in response to crises like COVID-19, they do make stimulus packages available. But at the end of the day, you look at the size of the stimulus package and you look at what was achieved with it. Quite often, you can't even tell where the money went. So we need to be very vigilant in terms of monitoring what we're doing before we even evaluate at the end. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Edith. I would just like to ask, we will be concluding in 5 minutes and handing over to Her Excellency Fatima Mohammed for the concluding remarks. I would like to ask if there are any ambassadors, African permanent representatives to the UN who would wish to take the floor before we conclude. And I would also please indicate in the chat if you would like to do so. And in the interim, while we just see if any of these ambassadors would like to say some last words, I will go to each one of our panelists and ask them in 30 seconds, what is the one thing that you think African countries should do to accelerate a green recovery? What is the one takeaway that you feel is the most important? And I'll start with Max, since your video is directly next to mine. So let's start with you.
Well, I was actually just about to respond to a comment in the chat, which mentioned the word natural resource curse. And just to say that the resources we're blessed as a continent, Africa. These resources aren't the curse. The curse comes about if we get our political economy wrong, our economic management wrong, our governance wrong, and therefore we do not use these resources for the benefit of all of Africa's peoples. And we mentioned fossil fuels, which is now on the way out. In the past, all the oil and these things from many of these countries, they do not benefit the majority of people to build the infrastructure or the human capital. So the first thing we need to do is get our governance right, our economic management right, in a way to make sure that as we move forward now to exploit the other resources that we're going to be using for the new energy economy, that we do it, that it's inclusive, and there's also intergenerational equity, and we make sure also that there's gender equity, and we show that we're a continent that can do it right, and we can leapfrog to a cleaner system, and we do things that benefit all of Africa's people and benefits the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Max. I think that's perfect and very concise. Fatima, maybe we can hear from you next.
It's a difficult one, actually, because it's hard to just point to one thing. I think Max mentioned because I've talked about agriculture. For me, agriculture is a no-brainer, so I don't want to belabor the points too much. But I think Max mentioned clean cooking. I think we have to begin to take clean cooking solutions seriously. The fact that it happens in a kitchen doesn't mean that we should undervalue the importance. This is a huge transformational part of that, our moving towards low carbon development. The plight that women face, the issues around respiratory illnesses. There was some study done that respiratory illnesses is a serious problem. It kills millions of people around the world, and particularly in Africa. So because I think I'm basically saying that let's invest more into this area, and let's not devalue the fact that clean cooking is about kitchen, about women, that somehow it's not an important part of the transition. It's a fundamental part of the transition. And it's a fundamental part of ensuring that there is equity, equity in terms of, men and women and what we can all bring to the table, but not equity also in terms of ensuring that, women are not subsidizing with their health, with their time, whilst, we are thinking about other things. I think Ahuna talked about the productive capacity, and for me, that is quite important. So we should look at that as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Fatima. Dr. Edith, maybe in 30 seconds, I could get your quick last message. And then if Rene is online, we can hear from him. And we'll go to the permanent representative or the mission of Morocco for some brief remarks. They would like to also make some remarks. So Dr. Edith.
Thank you, JP. So from me, the last take-home message is that COVID-19 may have caught us napping because we didn't expect it. It just fell from nowhere. However, it presented both a challenge and an opportunity. As much as we had our development goals and telling ourselves we'll be somewhere by 2030, what it means is that now we know better. We know that those are not going to happen. We know how much the virus has been continually mutating to create new variants, and it's going to be here with us. And green recovery actually offers us the opportunity to embrace what we have so that we can recover way beyond the level that we ever anticipated before. So we can never continue to nap anymore. Let's embrace green recovery. Let's make investments that are sustainable. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Edith. I think a perfect message for us to end on. Rene, would you like to give some quick remarks? I think, yes. I'm not sure if he's connected. Then, in that case, je voudrais inviter le représentant du Maroc de faire...
I'd like to invite the permanent observer from Morocco to make his closing remarks. Thank you, Jean-Paul. I'll take the floor in the name of my permanent observer, who salute you for this initiative, and more specifically, thank you for this excellent platform dedicated to energy mix and climate action. So I'll address the audience in English. Je voudrais sur
the most focus of our discussion. We've heard from so many panelists that the COVID-19 crisis has led to an unparalleled fall in prices of the petrol, and we do agree that petroleum and gas companies potentially have seen 68% of decline in their revenues from 2020 compared to the year before. This actually it constitutes a collapse and a reduced of production ability, and it gives an impetus to give an example or a case for what Africa and many other regions around the world could do with regard to renewables. And in that sense, Morocco does present a relevant example in this respect in order to ensure that the country's energy security while fulfilling our commitments against global warming. We have raised our NDC commitment just last week to 45%, which was communicated to the UNFCCC, and also our raise or share of clean energy in the electricity mix to 42% by 2021, which is this year. Of course, our longer term target is to reach 52% of renewables by 2030. So this is to say, in a very nutshell, if it's possible for a few countries in Africa, that means it is possible for the whole region. And we are very, very optimistic in order to keep, enlarging these best practices, and also to make a case for what Africa can do for itself in that regard. I will end with maybe a small note and very quickly on financing these projects. 2 years ago, the UN has led a fantastic climate summit under the initiative of His Excellency Antonio Guterres, and many multi-stakeholder initiatives have seen the lights, many of which do target energy transition in Africa, especially for least developed countries. So maybe this is also an opportunity and an occasion to say, let's not reinvent the wheels, and let's reinforce and give impetus to what has already been launched not too long ago. Thank you again for this opportunity, and congratulations for OSA and for all the participants.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, the representative of Morocco. We now have the great pleasure to go to the closing remarks, which will be delivered by Her Excellency, Mrs. Fatima Kiari Mohammed, the Permanent Observer of the African Union to the United Nations. Thank you very much for your patience, Your Excellency, and you have the floor to deliver concluding remarks.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jean-Paul. It's really an honor for me to be here with you today to deliver the closing remarks. This very important event. It's been a very interesting session, and there's so much to say, but given the time limitations, I will try to be as brief as possible. Honorable ministers, distinguished delegates, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, let me begin by thanking our partners in organizing this event, OSA, UNECA, UNDP, particularly for their tireless efforts to make this event a success, and with a special gratitude, of course, to our various teams who've been working tirelessly behind the scenes. And thank you as well to all the member states and participants from across the sectors from around the world for your participation and your contributions, and particularly to you, Jean-Paul, for the phenomenal moderation of this entire program. This high-level political forum is a key platform for shining a light and projecting priority areas for the SDGs. And Africa Day in particular focuses on priority themes for us for achieving the SDGs and AU Agenda 2063. And this morning's session, or sessions, I should say, we have highlighted the importance that a green economy and a green recovery with a focus on renewable energy, digitalization, and nature-based solutions could offer in terms of environmental impact, economic development and growth, and an overall healthier, sustainable future, particularly if we're able to realign COVID-19 recovery packages with social and environmental objectives. The sessions also highlighted the significant progress Africa was making prior to the pandemic on the implementation of the SDGs and Agenda 2063. And some of our member states have also shared their perspectives and what they're currently doing on a national level to ensure recovery, while experts have also delved into the issues and provided concrete examples and recommendations on how we can recover and recover better. Key to note is that recent studies have estimated that 90% of African countries have already localized the SDGs into their national development plans, and that among the 10 fastest growing economies in the world, 7 are in Africa. And also that economists assert that Africa has had a steady growth of youth employment for the past 2 decades. We are moving in the right direction. Now, although the pandemic has stalled this momentum, there's an opportunity here for us to be able to channel our efforts and target the most vulnerable in order to build back better and get back on track towards achieving the SDGs and Agenda 2063. While we're still finding our way out of the global health crisis, we're also faced with tough choices. So we need to act decisively and urgently to bridge the gaps that have been exacerbated by the pandemic, especially on SDG 1, no poverty, SDG 2, no hunger, SDG 3, good health and well-being, SDG 4, quality education, and SDG 8, decent work. And one of the lessons that each of us has learned over the past year is that digital technologies have become an essential part of our lives and more so our future. So I must highlight here that the pandemic is opening an opportunity for us to reshape our future, to empower our populations, particularly our women and youth with digital skills and enhancing STEM towards digital transformation and bridge the digital divide. In addition, digital connectivity will enhance the efficiency of the African continental free trade area in connecting our 1.3 billion people and potentially lifting 30 million people out of extreme poverty by 2035. And of course, access, as it has been highlighted, to energy plays a fundamental role here. In terms of our fiscal spending, therefore, we must give a significant priority to financing digital technology infrastructure. And this will propel the already existing technological hubs on the continent and create more jobs, especially for youth and women. Finally, in relation to the digital environment, while we're migrating towards that and migrating towards leading towards a more connected world, we must also recognize that it also brings new challenges of internet regulation, cybersecurity, privacy, data protection, and of course, online protection of children, amongst others. So successfully combating cybercrime and protecting information infrastructure will also require international cooperation to promote the exchange of experience, identification, and application of compatible norms and standards. So simply put, our success with the SDGs depends on our well-being and the well-being of our planet. Our long-term survival and prosperity are tied to the responsible consumption of resources and biodiversity of our planet, and our response therefore must be multidimensional. And a multidimensional response requires us to investigate the opportunities of our multilateral system, which is built on the pillars of cooperation and solidarity to enhance human welfare together, regardless of our differences. Our global efforts to build back better will materialize when Africa, as any other part of the world, has adequate access to health services and especially now supply to COVID vaccines. So while thanking you all once again for making this program a success and for your contributions, let me conclude by emphasizing that our development financing, our partnerships, and resource mobilization initiatives must be responsive and strategic so that we may realize transformational outcomes. We are in the decade of action, So let's therefore move away from lamentations and act decisively towards achieving a sustainable future. Thank you very much for your attention and have a great rest of the week. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, and we've really appreciated the thoroughness of your intervention, which has really recapped very successfully the very rich discussions that have taken place over the last 3 hours. And we look forward to be able to put all of the recommendations into a document which will be, of course, available for consultation and which will inform the ongoing discussions around how African countries can achieve a green recovery and how we can address the challenge of sustainable development, which is a challenge shared by all. I would like to thank everyone once again. I think Her Excellency has already covered, I think, all of the recognition. So it simply remains us to close the session and thank everyone for their participation, for their contributions, and all of the facilitators, including the interpreters and all the technical teams. And I think the messaging that is coming out is one which can really help us focus on some key messages and actions that can be taken by African countries. And of course, organizations that are supporting African countries. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. Bonne journée et bonne soirée.
Thank you very much and have a great day and have a good evening.
Thank you.